And beautiful. Looks like we are live on everywhere. So g'day to everyone, or should I say bonsoir, on the 14th of July here on Bastille Day. I'm sure I'm going to get pulled up on some French pronunciation tonight as we celebrate all things French and all things French spirits. And it could have just been me hanging out here at the Oak Barrel in the middle of the Sydney CBD, but I've been very, very lucky to have some very special guests hooked up by my very good friend Mauro from Cerbaco. But we actually have, for the first time at an Oak Barrel tasting, Gabriel, the founder of Cerbaco, and a wealth of knowledge for all things France and French spirits. But guys, welcome. Thank you for joining me on the Day of Days for France.
Well, all the pleasure is mine to join you. And if you have a problem with your pronunciation of French, you will have to excuse me for my pronunciation of English. Have we got everyone listening?
Yeah, we got people in there listening. So I'm going to ask you some questions as we go through tonight. But first, very important, I'm going to pour myself a drink to kick us off. And I think I might start with Ring Clean Clean, you reckon?
Yes.
Yeah, beauty. Okay. With a French liqueur. But for those who don't know, and obviously we're a bottle store, so not everyone is involved with the distribution side of the booze industry. But Cerbaco have one of the most diverse and broad portfolios of products that we're lucky enough to work with here at the Oak Barrel. A lot of French stuff. There's things from all over the world, but I think a lot of French products at the heart of the portfolio, ranging from liqueurs to whiskies to cognacs to armagnacs to liqueurs to mistels to a whole bunch of things, to ciders to everything pretty much that they drink in France.
I should say that since Australia started to distill on a large scale and everyone does it in the garden or wherever, we have a lot of very interesting local Australian products and of course gins. I think there are 80 different distillers producing 600 different gins, so it's quite remarkable. So now at Cerbaco, we have a big portfolio of local Australian products and a large portfolio of products from all over the world, but of course the majority is French products. There is a reason behind that. The French are not bad at making cognac brandies. No,
they've had a bit of practice at it. So I mean, where did this start? Like, how long has Cerbaco been going, and how did you get into founding it?
Cerbaco has been going from almost 1985. I used to be in charge of Kleber Tires, a subsidiary of Michelin in Australia. And I used to take back to France, in Paris, of course, groups of tire dealers to train them technically and commercially, marketing as well, on radial tires at the time. And since Kleber was very involved in restaurants as well, just as Michelin with its Michelin guide, there was Kleber with its Kleber guide. And when I had my groups of Australian tire dealers or Japanese tire dealers, because I was based in Australia, but I was in charge of the whole Pacific, or New Zealander tire dealers, in the evening, after hard work of training, I used to take them to the best restaurant in Paris. Kleber was wealthy and we could afford to invite them. So the top 3-star restaurants of Paris, we used to go there all the time. Some of the tire dealers were quite impressed. They didn't even order beer for the sake of not being ejected out of the restaurant at the time. And I noticed in these great restaurants, cognacs, armagnacs, calvados, rums, which were in very simple bottles with handwritten labels from artisans that were so preoccupied with quality and giving all the details on their products. You would know that it was from a barrel, it was distilled at such date, it was bottled at such date, and the barrel had been kept in the cellar. at such level in the cellar for such period of time, and then taken down progressively, and the humidity of the cellar was such and such in a region which was oceanic type of climate. Or it was a whole story on these bottles, and of course, that was a sure sign that we were talking brilliant products with age which was quite substantial, because of course, often you need 10 or 15 years minimum to get a proper quality. So when many years later I left Kleber, because they wanted me to be back in France and to take care of the whole Pacific region from France, as well as the whole of Africa from France, I figured that's a bit too much. And I wanted to stay with my good friend Bob Jane, at the time he was my distributor in Australia.
A very, very famous name in Australian motoring and Australian motorsport is Bob Jane.
I have known him for 15 years as a very good friend of mine. We didn't always see exactly in the same way, but it's normal. He was the client, I was the supplier. And however, we became the first imported tire on the market in a matter of 1 year, thanks to Bob, because at the time Australia was still in cross-pipe tires, and I brought radial tires. Well, so that meant that when I left Kleber, I thought, this is the time when Australia is coming out of a slightly prehistoric gastronomy style. So we had at that time Stephanie Alexander, Tony Milson, and all these people that were emerging and opening their own restaurants. They were all running every year to France to look at what they were doing in the 3 stars and coming back with the menus and becoming friends with our top chef in France, because Australians have always been loved by the French. So, and these people became my friends as well, because I was a poor little Frenchman lost in a desert of gastronomy. So immediately I knew the good restaurants, the very few good restaurants, and I became friends with Tony, with Stephanie and all that. And then I thought, well, maybe I should stay in Australia, get and get these products from France, and then visit these small artisan suppliers and beg them to send them to me in Australia, where I would sell them to all these emerging great restaurants, great Australian restaurants. So that was the beginning of me importing a number of Calvados, cognacs, and Armagnacs. And that developed progressively. Of course, the first year, I could barely survive on income. And the second year was a little bit better. I must say that for many years, the income was fairly mediocre, but the work was fairly easy. 2 days a week would be sufficient. And it worked very quickly, well by itself. It was only limited by the expense of a number of good restaurants where these products would be appreciated. And so I grew parallel to the gastronomy in Australia, basically. And then from one person doing everything, me, we became a few more. My wife, partner joined in, and now there are about 13 or more people at Cerbaco who make sure that we have great products of great quality, and we are not selling cognacs, we are selling cognacs of a specific origin, because each origin has its own style. A Grand Champagne in cognac has nothing to do with a Borderie or a Petit Champagne or a Bon Bois or a Fin Bois or a Bois Ordinaire. You see, the diversity is amazing. And within that diversity, we have different suppliers with their own style as well. So multiply the areas of origin by the number of suppliers that we have in each origin and by the different style that they have. It is quite amazing, and this is why you might be surprised that, for example, we carry so many cognacs and so many armagnacs in our range. as well the fact that Armagnac is far more able to quote vintages than Cognac is. Cognac has always been a bit squashed and crushed by the influence of the main commercial Cognac, who don't like age to be mentioned because their stocks vary with demand. So sometimes you have stocks of very old cognacs, and their VSOP sometimes are more than 6-7 years, or even more. And sometimes, of course, when the market is exploding, well, their stocks reduce substantially, and then the VSOP comes down to 4 or 5 years, things like that. So we are in a completely different style because origin, quality, etc., etc. And age, we mentioned the age, which is extremely important. One thing that the non-connoisseur should know is that spirit is only as good as the time it has spent in a barrel made of wood. Because when it is in glass, it doesn't change anymore. It is sterilized in what it used to be when it was put in the bottle, and will not change. An 1893 Armagnac or Cognac, which has been distilled in 1893 and bottled in, let's say, 1903, giving it 10 years, will be no better than a 2010, which has been bottled in 2020. Might even not be even as good because in 1893 we were not too particular about the quality. It was more the alcohol that triggered the interest rather than the beauty of it. But I interrupted you, and you probably have got things to ask for me.
Well, I've actually got quite an interesting, like it's fascinating how all this started, and obviously going back to the mid '80s is a very, very different world to what we see today. But when you went to those small producers in France in the mid '80s and said, "Hey, sell me your stuff because I want to go and sell it in Australia," what was that conversation like? How did those producers react to you coming up with that question?
Well, you know, there was the usual fixed silence and the strange look that you would get from a French peasant from the lost areas of France. And usually, if you didn't start patting the dog or winking at the kids and patting the cows to show that you had some understanding of agriculture, because in Armagnac, it's a whole farm or a small castle, if you prefer, a domain. Armagnac is famous for, traditionally, things have changed a bit, but usually you had crops and you had all kinds of animals, geese, ducks, chooks, pigs, cows, sheep, goats, all that in the same farm. So when you visited these people, you had to use the manners, and until such time they would accept you. And it was very difficult because they did not produce much. And of course, all the top restaurants, the great bars, had all managed to get confidentially their products. So it was something a bit confidential. And if you wanted them, it was at the expense of someone else. So you had to become friends with them. And that was made easy because I had a friend who knew very well all the top chefs in France. And being in Paris or in France with a best friend of mine was always a marvel. Because whenever we would arrive at Chapelle, at Bocuse, or wherever, Robuchon later, but we would enter via the kitchen and say hello to the chef. And the chef said, Daniel, which was the name of my friend, come and sit down, and bang. Have you had lunch? No. Well, sit down. We would have lunch in the kitchen, or we would have lunch in the front silver service and all that. So that friend knew the top chefs of the top restaurant so well that it was the passport to get the artisan maker to supply. So this is the way I could start.
So I want to say a couple of quick g'days on to people watching on the Facebook as well. Guillermo, David and Caroline Taylor down in Tasmania there. And happy birthday, Caroline, for the other day. And Ali from the Sullivan's Cove Distillery in Tassie's throwing us a wave as well. I want to talk about the present and, in a bit, but just like to sort of wrap up that sort of era, that 80s, this starting era, you've managed to get these farmers to sell you their spirits. By the time you get them to Australia, like what was the Australian restaurants' reaction to this, for stuff that they would have never seen before being so small batch and artisan? Like what was the Australian end?
Well, I mentioned that the restaurants who were interested in that were the enlightened ones, the modern ones, which were bringing a little revolution to the Australian restaurant scene. And you may remember that in the 80s, there were not that many restaurants. As I mentioned before, Tony Bilson, Stephanie Alexander, and a few more, and some very traditional French restaurants or restaurants with a French name trying to do the odd French beef burgundy and snails. So they were all keen. They were keen because in Australia at that time, the number of spirits that were imported were very few. They were mostly from the big French companies that had invested in Australia and were making wine and brandy. We can think of Pernod Ricard, but not at that time, or Rémy Martin, Rémy, which was famous for its Rémy brandy, which was made in Australia. So outside of these groups, there was not much spirit. I remember when I arrived in Australia for the first time, in the early 70s and traveling the country, well, you would rarely see the odd bottle of Courvoisier VSOP, the green Chartreuse, and that was it. That was it. There was nothing else. Pernod, yes, there was Pernod, which is a pastis. And so it was a virginal ground for spirits. And the moment you came with things which were such a large leap above what was available, which was suddenly almost frightening, but these products were so interesting because people then would find out that cognac was a lot more than what appeared on what they were used to see. And so wherever there was interest, creativity, modernist approach to food, they would just jump at them. And I remember Michael McMahon, the Baron Joy House, and these people at the time, they jumped at it like mad. I remember he bought from me 24 bottles of 1914 Armagnac just like that. Took him years to pay for them, but it was amazing. So you know the type of people. At the same time, I had some wealthy. There has always been an elite in Australia. An elite of people with some wealth who could afford such products and who quickly knew about it. So I had some private customers, lovers of cognac, of Armagnac. At that time, Australians began to travel a lot to Europe and of course to France, where they discovered all that. So it all came at the right time.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm working my way through some French, like a range of French things, all from the Cerbaco portfolio, obviously. And Mara was very nice enough to drop off this to me a little bit earlier today. And I know nothing about it, but it smells good. So if someone wants to give me a quick spiel on this one, because I mean, obviously, like you were talking there a lot about Armagnac and cognac, but there's so much, variations on those into like Calvados and all sorts of things, but also like the art of liqueur is, very steeped in French history.
Especially in France, we have had all kinds of liqueurs for such a long time. Whether the Dubonnet going back to the beginning of last century, or the Birlot has always been fairly limited to one region, the Auvergne, the central massif of France, because by its very ingredients, chestnuts and apples. So a maceration of crushed chestnuts and apple, and that Birlot, you can see that it carries is it a gold medal?
It is a Medal d'Or, Paris 2017. Again, yeah, my French is pretty average.
It's from the Concours Général. The Concours Général is very interesting because it's organized by the state. It's a state organized competition. Therefore, it is absolutely objective. There is no corruption of any kind. The jury is made usually of very reliable people with great knowledge and great noses. So the Concours Général of Paris is famous for the prizes and medals it gives to not only wine, spirits, but lots of other products which are all covered by an appellation in France. So, for example, you have chickens from Bresse have got an appellation. They are a very special type of chicken, which might be a special breed. They need to have their, I don't know, almost 100 square meters each to roam around. It must be pure grass. The moment the grass has been damaged, bang, they have to be moved to another paddock. This appellation, and in cheese, of course, we have so many appellations which are government controlled. In fact, everything has an appellation which is government controlled, and therefore it is a bit normal that there is a competition which is government controlled as well. And this is why it is famous, because if you get a gold, bronze, or silver medal at this competition, you know that the quality is there. If you are in a shop, you see the medal, you just don't discuss or argue. You just grab a bottle, you are sure it's good. So the Birlot is a very famous, and it is quite delicious. You have got it in your glass now.
Yeah,
no, it's pretty good. On the palate, it is delicious. It is very round. And it is three-dimensional. It is not just a blend of a few aromatics. No, it works together. The aromatics are well integrated and they have their own personality. Of course, Birlot can be used in any cocktail where you wish to. And it's interesting you mention it because we are in winter. Chestnut is, of course, the fruit of winter. It is the fruit of the wild boar first, but if they don't eat them all, you can have some to make the liquor. Apple, chestnut, and of course, a good spirit as the base. A good spirit is usually, it's terrible to say so, but is a spirit which is distilled from wine, because from wine you pick up a wide range of aromatic spectrum. The aromatic spectrum of grape is so large, less big, less much. Whenever the spectrum of fermented sugar is like this, and of grain or any cereal to make whiskey is a very narrow aromatic spectrum, but it doesn't mean that it is not interesting. However, any good liquor will use a better ethanol, a better alcohol from the distillation of wine and not the distillation of raw products, sugar, or cereals. That's why some gins in Australia are made from the distillation from from the raw brandy in a way, before it goes into aging, which gives more personality. And in the liquor, it's very important. Every ingredient must be of the best quality for the sum of them to be of the best quality. The Birlot, this is perfect for winter, straight, or in all kinds of cocktails. And of course, it's for a mixologist to show his inventiveness, which is not easy because with a chestnut and apple, you have to be clever to think of matching harmonious cocktails.
Yeah. For those who may not have tried it, I got a lot of apple on the nose, and then the palate was this really delicious, thick sweetness that came through and like really moreish. Now that I'm going back, I'm getting far more of the chestnuts coming up as an aroma. And I do have the greatest job in the world because I get to try a whole bunch of different things. And it's always very exciting when Mauro comes in and he's got a bag full of weird and wonderful things that I've never tried before. And this is another one of them. And Mauro knows that I have a big love for citrus, and I love, apples. I fell in love with a lot of the pomos and that sort of thing. I mean, Gabriel, like, do you think that like there's a real correlation between, some of these French apple-based, fruit-based drinks and Australia? I mean, I can like winter 100%, but I could see myself with a block of ice on a warm day just drinking this, and it's 18% alcohol. So I could have a few of them and not fall off my chair as well. Do you see that correlation?
Yeah. Well, in Australia, you have got lots of people who are working at improving the ciders and making Calvados, or what it could not be called Calvados because they cannot use a name which corresponds to a geographical area. But they can make an apple spirit, which is everyone would understand that it is a Calvados, and the more they age it, and in the better ways of aging it, that's not the coronavirus. It's just the normal.
That's right. We're all very responsibly self-isolating here, so we're all in different rooms. We're all good.
Well, and you have got your disinfectant in your glass.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is quite funny because you may have seen that for a while the whole planet was singing the praise of hydrochloroquine or chloroquine as a remedy for the coronavirus, or at least something. If you take it early, you may save your life, or you may not suffer too much. Donald Trump had blocked the distribution of Boris Johnson was swearing by hydrochloroquine. So, of course, it is just a derivative of cinchona, the cinchona bark from South America. So we had a newsletter at Cerbaco to encourage people to drink our various vermouths, liqueurs, aperitifs, who all had cinchona in them, and telling them that at least if they don't cure their coronavirus, they might die merry rather than sinisterly sad.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but I'm not taking any chances, so I'm going to keep drinking good drinks just in case, not taking that chance.
They will save you. Yeah. But of course, you need quality.
I'm gonna move on again, sort of going up in alcohol a little bit, and now getting on to a Calvados. It's been a bit of a staple here at the Oak Barrel. This is the 2003.
Which year?
2003.
Well, you better enjoy the 2003 because the cellar is running out of it in the Donfontaine region in France. We may not see it for much longer. Victor Gontier is very much the farmer. Many years ago, when I used to call, what was amazing that I could hear on the telephone when I used to call Victor Gontier, because there was no fax, nothing, just mail by the post or the telephone. And the telephone, like in any French farm, is just next to the door, the outside door, inside, but next to the outside door, which is usually open. And when I was calling, there was always a background concert of guinea fowls, chickens, the odd snort of a pig, or the bark of a dog. It was really the farm. And that was rather nice. And Victor Lantier, the origin is d'Enfrontais of this Calvados. The whole region of Normandy, Brittany, have got apple trees and pear trees growing in the meadows, the paddocks where the cows are munching the grass to make great camembert cheese with their milk. And these meadows are shade, get some shade from these apple trees and pear trees. Some regions have got far more pear trees than apple trees, or it's about equal. And d'Enfrontais is such a region, which makes then the Calvados, which is quite different from the others in the sense that it is much rounder and softer and fruity, but in a more comfy style of fruit. Compared, and d'Enfrontais with that much more pear juice, usually to be under the appellation d'Enfrontais, you need at least 1/3 of pear juice to 2/3 of apple juice. But you can go the whole way to 50%. It's only the minimum is 33% of pear juice in the cider, which once distilled becomes a Calvados, of course, and it gives to d'Enfrontais Calvados a very specific style. Of course, on top of that, it's a more recent appellation, which has more restrictions in terms of the varieties and all that. All these trees I mentioned, these pear trees and apple trees, their fruit is barely edible. Why? Because they are fruit for cider. They are not fruit to eat like an apple or a pear that you have at the table. We don't call them table apples or table pears. They are cider apples and cider pears or berry pears. Why? Because they are unedible. You munch into one, you crush into one, and you have an enormous bitterness and aromatics, which are very difficult to distinguish because they have got a palette of so many aromatics who, being all at the same level, annihilate each other, more or less. It's a bit like the circle of color, that if you make that circle turn very fast, you get white color. So these apples have a very flat taste, a very bitter taste, and the bitterness is quite balanced by a lot of sugar, but they are very sweet, but very bitter. So it's very difficult, or sour, it's very difficult to feel the sweetness, which is contrasted by that. But however, when it is crushed, the juice is absolutely brilliant. The cider is so rich, powerful, that when you distill it, you have gathered aromatics from so many different of these pears, cider pears, or cider apples. You have a complexity of aromatic, which is amazing. So with ciders, with such a complexity, and I know this well because for many years we used to bring our French ciders to the cider competition in Australia, and often people would say, "Wow, shoot, what a full mouth you get." Well, distill that and you get the Calvados, which is absolutely brilliant. So this is what I said, the d'Enfrontais Calvados. The other Calvados, another advantage of the d'Enfrontais Calvados, it doesn't need as many years to age. And 2003 Donfrontais would take in a Pays d'Auge variety, in the other variety of Calvados, in the Pays d'Auge variety, you would need another 10 years, or at least 5 years more, to get the same level of maturation. However, a Calvados from Pays d'Auge, if it is aged sufficiently, which is more than a Donfrontais, you may think that it is a superior Calvados to the Donfrontais. So the Donfrontais is perfect as a young Calvados, or an adult, if you were a grown-up. And the Pays d'Auge variety would be better as I wouldn't say an ancestor Calvados, but something like that. Apart from that, there are other Calvados, which are not called Calvados because they are not from the region, which are Eau de Vie de Cidre, which is cider spirit. That's the name that the Calvados from Brittany can be called. It cannot be called Calvados. It's called spirit from Brittany. Cider spirit from Brittany, which we haven't got in our hands. And I think this is quite wrong because they may not be as good as Calvados, but they have got their own charm, rustic charm. So look for it. Maybe next year we'll bring one of them or two so that Mauro can come to you and say, guess what I have got?
Excellent. I look forward to it.
There's always something new.
Yeah.
Something new.
Yeah. And just sort of, I guess, put into perspective for a few people, when you get someone coming into the store, we organize a tasting or something, they'll hand you a price sheet and it might be an A4 page or a two-sided A4 page. The Cerbaco one is a book. It's about 16 pages, very small text of just everything. So I never, ever, it's like a puzzle I'm never going to complete. I'm never going to be able to try everything, which is always makes it very exciting. But I mean, we're
whole life.
yeah. And then the vintages disappear too quickly. So you miss that one and you have to get on to the next one. It's part of the fun. But I mean, for some people might not have been to France. I've only been very quickly. I've only spent about a week there. But these sort of drinks that you bring in, are these very typical of what you would be drinking in France, in the sort of regions? Do they consume a lot of their own produce and what they distill and make around these regions?
Mm-hmm. Let us not exaggerate that. The French export their cognac and they drink whiskey, which is totally ridiculous because a cognac or an Armagnac will be so there are some great whiskeys, but if you are into spending hours with evolution, that's a French whiskey. So the French drink whiskey and they export cognac, Armagnac, and all the countries around France love them. The Germans are crazy about cognac. The British also, the Italians, the Spaniards maybe a bit less, but and the French, no, they have that snobbish attitude to think that whiskey is the fashion. They don't drink it for the pleasure; they drink it to impress the neighbor. So, if you ask me, the French, they are so lucky, all these magnificent products. Well, no, it's a bit like in Australia. It is also an elite who fully knows and fully enjoys whenever the great mass of the French, probably that was all that proletarianization brought by the 14th of July, 1789, who made the people decide, well, let's go for whiskey. After all these wars with England.
Yeah. And, but that's fascinating as well, because I'm a firm believer in studying history to see how those impacts affect what we drink today, whether that be gin or rum or whiskey or, I spent all last night talking about Italian Amaros and that sort of what. And I think it's definitely the same. But you did mention whiskey, and yes, it's, if you look up the Scotch industry figures, France is one of the biggest export markets. But to a bit of a French classic or sort of a Scotch French classic, I've got the Michel Corvette overaged. I think it might be a little bit bright for the thing there, but
Yeah.
And I do get asked the question often: how do you open these bottles of whiskey? And you open them like you would a bottle of wine. So you've got the cork there, so just go straight in, and you can see where the cork's gone in. But what do I do after that? We just put it straight back in. It's very easy. It comes out, it goes back in. So anyone who's concerned about Michel Corvette whiskey stoppers, it's very, very simple.
Just put back the cork, and always put the cork almost immediately after you have served, because all these esters, all these aromas inside the whiskey, they are packed with it. All they want to do is they want to oxidize. So they jump at the air which comes into the bottle and oxidize, and you can tell because now the smell of the whiskey is permeating the whole room. So it is best to close as soon as you have served, close back the bottle, otherwise your whiskey will be bringing an amazing perfume to the room, but at the same time we lose a little bit of its beautiful volatile ester. So don't let the volatile ester escape. The interesting thing is that it is a Scotch whiskey, which Michel Couvreur was a specialist to discover the best ones, and spent many, many years in Scotland where his job was to discover batches of whiskies from different distilleries and sort them out between the very brilliant quality, the less, and the mediocre. And eventually, this job of then dispersing them towards whatever label would go on them, whatever aging in whatever barrel. He knew his Scotch whiskey so well that one day he said, well, I know what to get, but I'm going to age them in France. Because in France, they dug a cellar in the limestone cliffs of Burgundy. And that cellar is so humid that you've got rivulets of water running on the ground. You are in absolutely saturated humidity, moisture in that cellar, which is the recipe for the best aging, whether it is Cognac, Armagnac, or Calvados. You must be at the maximum humidity rate. Saturation. Why? Simply because what you will lose in a saturated atmosphere, saturated with water, it's not water, it is alcohol. Alcohol, being more volatile than water, will permeate through molecule by molecule outside of the barrel, whenever some molecule and molecule of air will penetrate the barrel, and you will lose the alcohol, which means that if you start with a young Scotch at 60, 62 or 65% alcohol, in that very humid cellar, the alcohol will drop fairly quickly. And this is what you call a natural reduction. You don't have to add water to bring it down to 40, 45%. So you don't have to dilute it. Therefore, when you can get a natural reduction in a number of years without having to dilute your whiskey, the aromatic concentration is much, much higher. And this is why these Michel Couvreur Scotches are brilliant, because they have that luck to go down in natural reduction in an amazing way. And of course, after he has to go through the same, as I said before, the aromatic palette of a grain of wheat or a grain of rye, is fairly narrow. So of course, whiskey cannot be as good as it is unless it is picking up some aromatics from somewhere else, which is often barrels of sherry, barrels of port, barrels of wine. And again, Michel Couvreur has the knack to discover the right barrels to use for the aging of the scotches. So natural reduction thanks to a very unique cellar, plus a great selection of Scotch whiskey to bring to France. And after that, the perfect discovery of barrels. And you know, it doesn't have to go very far to get the equivalent in France of sherry barrels from Cadix or Jerez de la Frontera. In Spain, it just goes across from Burgundy to Jura, a few 50 kilometers. And there we have got what we call the vin jaune. You probably know the vin jaune.
Beautiful wines.
Savagnin variety, which is made as a sherry in the barrel, open air, and with a veil on the surface. So, which great vin jaune is a great wine, which makes great barrels for great scotches.
It's an interesting concept because we talk about it a little bit in wine in the fact of, the best farmer, the best, vineyard manager in the world might not be the best winemaker in the world. And so sometimes that's good to have different things. And I think you can, apply that to whiskey a little bit as well. The best distiller in the world might not be the best, barrel manager in the world. So I love that idea of selecting whiskeys and going, okay, I'm going to match that by my nose to that barrel and that to there. And I think, even though all the Michel Corveux whiskies, and as much as I've tried, Mauro and Manu will never tell me where they come from. I've pushed them a fair bit to try and give me the secrets, but they won't tell me. But it's all these distilleries in Scotland, but there's a house style because there's nothing quite like what happens in those caves. And I haven't been, but I think, Mauro, I think you've been down to those caves. The photos online are awesome, but you can almost smell walking into that barrel house every time. Doesn't matter which Michel Corveux it is, you can almost smell it every time you open a bottle.
Yeah, and it's a different style. You can tell the age, you can tell the concentration of aromatic in the Michel Corveux whiskies. What is interesting is that the few whiskies which are made in Australia are particularly. Some are very good. Some are very good, but they are made in a very expensive way. For example, you get yourself a 50-liter barrel of pure oak, young oak, and all that. And of course, the aging is half what you need. 3-4 years in a 50-liter barrel is like 8-10 into something larger.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's something we speak about a lot in Australian spirits is we should be making Australian whiskey. We shouldn't be trying to make Scotch whiskey or bourbon whiskey or French whiskey. And I think that's the same with French distilleries. And there's a few bottlings I can see on the floor next to me that I'm just about to put on the shelf as well as stuff like this. They should be making the best French whiskey that they can, not trying to copy anyone else. And I think Michel Corveux goes, okay, this is the whole mindset of this is these beautiful barrels in this beautiful, cellar space in the limestone. No one else can replicate
style
this.
Of whiskey, and it's interesting to see what the Australian style of whiskey will be eventually. And look, with all these great barrels in Rubber Glen, have been making Tokay, port, sherry, and all that. You got it done. You got it made.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the problem is the distillation and getting the right cereals, because you can't get the average wheat which goes on cargo ships all across the world.
The next bottle I'm reaching for is it's an Armagnac. Obviously, it's Delord. It's the 1989 vintage. Anyone who's been into the oak barrel will know that we've got a lot more Armagnacs than we do cognac in store here. That's because we sell a lot more Armagnac than we do cognac. There's a little bit down to me. I just find Armagnac so beautiful that I tend to reach them. For me personally, I think the 1989 is quite a good vintage. I won't explain why. But for me personally, 89, good year.
Often it's quite funny because often a good year in Armagnac is not a good year in wine.
Yeah, okay.
The reason behind that is that the best wine to make an Armagnac is a wine which is very bland. So the barriers for wines make wines which are very bland. As I explained before, why are they bland? They are bland because there is not one aromatic that dominates. For example, you will say, oh, this Pinot Noir is magnificent because I'm getting some red berries and some griotte, some sour cherries, things like that. That's only because in that wine, there are 2 or 3 aromatics that dominate and give style, interest to the wine. A bland wine has got all these aromatics, but none of them is strong enough to dominate. So they are all keeping themselves at the same level, preventing one to emerge. However, the distillation which concentrates 10 times the product, you need 10 liters of wine to make 1 liter to make 1 liter of cognac or Armagnac. You have concentrated your aromatic 10 times. Then, after you age them another 10, 20, 30 years, boom, natural reduction, preferably in very humid cellars, and then you get your concentration of aromatic, which is 30 times, 40 times what it was in wine. And then they are able, once poured in the glass, with Armagnacs and all that, then all these aromatics, according to their degree of volatility, the lighter ones, the ethers, the ethereal ones will come out first. And then the slightly heavier one will take another half an hour or 45 minutes, and the heavier ones an hour or 2. Eventually, if you want to fully enjoy your Armagnac, if it is a complex one, you will need a good 24 hours, whereby you put the glass to rest with a little piece of paper on top and come back to it 2 hours later and see the evolution. And then put back a piece of paper on it, come back 3 hours later, 4 hours later, and next time. And you can finish it at breakfast with your croissant. Don't dip the croissant in it because it's an insult to the croissant. But you see so much complexity, so much concentration of aromatic. It takes time. You have to turn the glass so that it comes out. And Delors is quite amazing because it's difficult. He seems to have an overall style which is softness, roundness, easiness, and at the same time he manages to have great variety because from one vintage to the other, it's not always the same. You would expect that it's a 1989, which is more very much like the 1988, except it's a bit less concentrated. No. 1 year to the other, there's always some difference. You may not mix the same terroir exactly, even if they are all in the same origin, which is Bas Armagnac. 3 origins in Armagnac: Bas Armagnac, Tenares, and High Armagnac. And within the Bas Armagnac, there is another origin, which is Grand Bar Armagnac, which comes with the very best Armagnac, but complex, difficult. Darros, for example.
That's what I'm sipping at the moment. Darros 1999 in Rieston.
Yeah. And this 1999. We should have stayed on that year instead of getting into the next century with the coronavirus.
Well, to be fair, that Darros tasting that we did about a month ago was some of the most fun I've had this year, coronavirus or not. That was very, very good. And I've actually, I need to, tomorrow I speak to you, I've had a few requests for some certain vintages that I need to grab off you from people that were with that tasting. We've tipped over a bit of an hour, so I'm quite mindful of the fact that you probably need to cook up a big meal for tonight, or at least enjoy one. But I love this.
Well, I can wait for my snails because tonight is snail night. 14th of July, we have to make it a special night. So we'll have the snails in lots of garlic and parsley and butter.
Yeah, like when I was back on the liqueurs and on the Calvados, I just wanted some fresh warm bread and some gooey cheese. That's all I was like, fantasizing about having it in front of me. But
I could pass it on to you, but it won't go very far.
Yeah, the technology hasn't quite got there. We can pass food through the internet yet, but it'll get there. But look, it's fascinating, and just like it takes a lifetime to go through the portfolio, we could probably spend a lifetime talking about each producer. But before I let you go, I'd be quite interested to see what you think is going to be, like the next thing from France that is going to be quite big, that is starting to grow for you. Like, is it liqueurs? Is it Calvados? Is it Mistels? Is it Army? Like, what are you seeing growth in Australia from your portfolio and from France?
Well, I can see that the rums.
Rum, okay.
But not all the rums, the agricole rums. It's interesting, one must know that there are two ways to make rum. One is to scratch the cane, get the juice, only the juice, ferment the juice into a wine which is called vazou, and distill. There you have picked all the aromatics from that sugarcane juice, all the aromatics concentrated in the wine, distilled and concentrated much further into the rum. And this is something which it represents 3 or 4% of the overall production of rum in the world. It's what we call rhum agricole from the Martinique and Guadeloupe, the French West Indies, and a few other countries. There is a little bit in Haiti, there is a little bit here and there. Even traditional rums made from molasses sometimes incorporate a bit of agricole rum, but that's not very important. And this is where I expect that people who are so in love with their traditional rums, which of course haven't got the beauty of a wide aromatic spectrum like agricole rum, because they are made from molasses, and molasses are what is left after you have boiled more or less the sugarcane juice, evaporated all the aromatics in the air, are left with sugar and molasses. And molasses will only concentrate the heavy aromatics, or caramel more or less, or derivative of caramel aromatics with a bit of spice sometimes. But you don't go very far in traditional rum. You don't go very far either if you are using modern refineries. Australia has got very modern sugar refineries. They will refine all the juice into sugar, and there is barely any molasses left to make a rum. So what do? Well, you pick up a bit of the sugar you have just made, and then you try to ferment it, and eventually you get something which is tasteless, but you can always discreetly put some synthetic aromatic in it, and eventually you come out with some taste. Voilà. So this is what I expect. I expect that suddenly Australia, having so much sugarcane, will eventually pick up the rum agricole style and start making some, which they do already in a very small quantity on the edge of Queensland and New South Wales. I can't remember the name. It's a rum agricole. It's non-aged. It's white, but so much better than any white clear rum. So much better. So already there is one in Australia. Now has to put it in the barrel for a few years, and preferably a very humid cellar, as I explained before. And therefore, we might get some very interesting rum agricole, which of course you will never get the appellation from France for that, but you can create your own appellations in Australia. After all, why not? And I look forward to it, because rum lovers have not yet discovered rum agricole with a spectrum of aromatic, which is like this, against the traditional, which is like this. Again, the rum agricole is like a cognac or an armagnac, whenever a traditional rum is more or less like a grappa, using the leftovers from the product. But that was a long story. So we will see something happening there. And I hope that it will be the way by which Australians will discover complexity in wide aromatic products. So, and eventually jump from these agricole rum onto the Armagnacs and the cognacs a bit more, for the sake of the health of society. Because if you have, like for example, you have 30 ml of an Armagnac or a cognac at the end of a meal, it's only equivalent to half a glass of wine. And therefore, you drink less alcohol, you are more sober, and you don't lose your license on your way home. And what's more, that extra glass of wine puts you to sleep, the conversation dies completely whenever all these esters in the cognac, the Armagnac, or the Michel Couvreur whiskey suddenly brighten your mind, and instead of falling asleep off the table, on the ground, you are a marvelous discoverer.
I think the distillery you might have been talking about was Husk Distillery up in Tumbolgum there, whose distiller they actually got from Martinique. He's a Martinique distiller. He was born in Martinique and he's come across. And very good friends of the Oak Barrel. I had a bit of a chat to them earlier this week, actually, and it's watch this space. There's some very exciting things coming from there. And I want to say a quick g'day, as Mara just has, to Jerome Delord on the Facebook chat, who says hello to you. And if I'm going to put two and two together and say he might have something to do with the Delord Armagnac that I just finished, and the 1989, very good vintage for Armagnac as well for human beings. 1989, very good vintage in my opinion. But yeah, and this is one of the things I love about this. You know, this is more than just a couple of Frenchmen, a Brazilian, and an Australian walk into a bar. You know, there's people from all over the world watching at the moment, which is really cool. But yeah, look, so I mean, it's very exciting, and I think, you know, what you were saying there about you know, the development of certain products. I still think that particularly the Australian summer, things like Pomo, like this liqueur, which you say the name better than I did before.
Birlou.
Yeah.
But you can use the English for it, Burlou.
Yeah. La Burlo, mate. Yeah, not quite.
Yeah,
no, not quite. But like that sort of thing over ice, where it's not 40%, it's sort of, you know, between 15 and 20% is just built for the Australian summer. But I think, yeah, we just need to keep pushing the knowledge a little bit and getting it in people's mouths, which is what Manu and Mauro have been excellent at in the city. I'm sure your reps in other states are good as well, but I think my ones are pretty good here.
I have to jump in because thank you so much. And Le Birlou over ice with coconut water is delicious. We did the buzz in Bondi 2 years ago until we finished our stock, and everybody was drinking Birlou Coco. Fantastic.
Not
Awesome.
Coco Chanel anymore, it's Coco Birlou.
Look, thank you everyone for jumping in, particularly Gabriel. I know we've probably all got some big Bastille Day dinners to get to. So thank you everyone for jumping in. Thank you everyone on the Facebook. And look, we could be here until tomorrow talking and listening to your story. So thank you very much. And I appreciate, and you know, in front of the boss, I will say a big thank you to the guys as well, who are my daily contacts. They do a very good job looking after me and keeping me happy, which is good.
And thank you very much, and bonsoir. And I should say à bientôt, see you soon, because there is so much more to say.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's not be strangers, and maybe one day even in the same room we could do this. Who knows what the world holds. Right. I'll quickly wrap up here and cancel the Facebook stream. So thank you everyone on Facebook. We'll see you at another one soon, I'm sure.